So now we have our first route set up, and it's routing to our first controller, which is our post controller, and it's returning a very simple blade view, which doesn't actually have any blade or dynamic features in it at the moment. It simply has some basic HTML, and we're just outputting a h1 tag and an unordered list of just static HTML strings. So now let's have a look at how we can start making this a little bit more dynamic. So let's jump over to our controller. So inside of our post controller, I'm going to create a new array here. So just inside of our index method, I'm going to create a new variable called post, and this is going to be equal to an array. And inside of here, I'm just going to create an array of posts. And this is just going to be equal to the same data we currently have inside of our blade view, my first post. And then let's create another post. And this is just going to say second post. Then we just close this off with a semicolon. Now we need a way to pass these down to the view. At this moment, this view here, the view posts, doesn't know about this data here. So there is multiple ways we can pass this down to the view. One of the most common ways, if you've only got a small data set like this, is pass an array as a second parameter in the view method. So we just need to key this up as posts, and then we want to pass in as a second parameter the posts array which we created here. Now this works absolutely fine, you can do it that way. Another way you can do it is using the with method. So let's just delete that second parameter, and then we can just chain on the end with. And then in here, we can just give it a key. So we can say posts, and then we just pass in our posts array like so. But now in our view, we can access this variable called posts. So now over in our post.blade.php file, instead of listing out each of the items here, we can loop over that array that we passed down and output them dynamically from the PHP code in our controller. So inside of our UL tag here, we can use something called a blade directive. Now there's many of these built into Laravel by default, and you can also create your own. That's not something I'm going to be covering in this introduction course. But if we just head over to the documentation, we can have a look at the blade directives that are available to us. So over in the documentation, if we come under the basics and come down to blade templates, and we just scroll down here, you can see there's a section called blade directives. So if we just click on this, you can see the blade directives start with an @ key. So you can do an if else, for example. So we're going to be using that. And we're also going to be using a loop to loop over the post. So let's have a look at that. So if we come under loops, we can see we have a for loop, for each, for else, and a while. So let's just implement one of these now in our code. So the first thing we probably want to do is just check whether if there is any posts. So at the top of our UL here, let's just do @if. And then inside of here, we can check that variable that we passed down. So remember over in our post controller, we keyed this as posts. So we can say if posts. So if there is any posts, we'll then show this content here. And then to close this, we need to do end if. So that's something to note, that the blade directive come in pairs, and you need to open and close them. Otherwise, this will cause an error. So we're saying if this post, show this content here. So now we can use another blade directive, and we're going to use one of those loops, and we're going to use a for each. So we can say for each, and we can say for each of the posts as post. So as you can see, this is very similar syntax to how you would do a normal for each inside of PHP. And let's just delete that first one now. And then obviously we need to close this off with end for each. So for each of the posts in the posts array, let's output this data. And to output the post, you need to use curly braces like so. And these are doubles. So 2 opening and 2 closing. And then inside of here, we can just simply output the post. And that's the current post inside of the posts for each loop. So let's jump over to the browser and check this out. Let's just refresh our post page. And you can see there, it's outputted our data, my first post, second post. So let's just add another item into this so you can see it working. So back over in our post controller, let's add a third post here. And let's just say my third post. Now let's refresh this in the browser. Let's do refresh. You can see there now it's outputted the third post we just added to the array. So this is how you make your pages dynamic and output data coming from PHP. As you can see, this is hard coded, so this is probably not something that you would do normally in a normal application. This would normally come from a database or a third-party API. And we will be looking at database interaction at a later video in this series.